Hollywood's golden age was a fortress of illusion. Every dazzling smile, every silk gown, every whisper of romance was meticulously scripted to hide the truth. But what if the biggest secret wasn't a scandalous affair or a hidden addiction? What if it was buried in the bodies of the stars themselves? For decades, rumors have slithered through the backlots and gossip columns that some of the most celebrated actresses of the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, icons of femininity, were not born female at all. These whispers weren't random cruelty. They grew from a world where gender was rigidly policed, yet certain women shattered every rule. They wore trousers, commanded boardrooms, loved other women, and lived with a swagger that didn't fit the demure mold. Some were actual transgender pioneers who underwent risky, groundbreaking surgeries in an era of savage intolerance. Others simply danced on the edge of androgyny, turning speculation itself into an art form. This is the story of 10 legends whose lives blurred the line between fact and rumor, between the woman on screen and the person underneath. The first of them didn't just break the mold, she exploded it. And America could only stare, mouths agape, as the impossible became front-page news. In the winter of 1952, a photograph landed on the desks of newspaper editors that would turn the world upside down. It showed a delicate blonde with high cheekbones, a soft smile, and a secret that rewrote everything Americans thought they knew about biology. Her name was Christine Jorgensen, and the headline screamed what nobody could quite believe: XGI becomes blonde beauty. Born George Jorgensen Jr., she had been a painfully shy kid from the Bronx, drafted into the Army, and utterly miserable in a body that felt like a prison. Desperate to live authentically, Christine traveled to Denmark in 1951 for a series of pioneering sex reassignment surgeries, something virtually unheard of at the time. When she flew back to New York in 1953, the media frenzy was apocalyptic. Photographers trampled each other at the airport. They even ignored Danish royalty on the same flight just to catch a glimpse of her. The New York Daily News ran that explosive headline, cementing Christine as an overnight sensation. What happened next was pure Hollywood. The polished, witty blonde became a nightclub singer and actress, packing venues with audiences torn between curiosity and genuine admiration. She disarmed the room with a cheeky quip. "Remember, I didn't cut anything," I added. Newspapers dubbed her the sex-change celebrity, and a movie contract was dangled before her. Though the big studio vehicle never fully materialized, she did star as herself in a fictionalized biopic, playing the role of a lifetime, her own. Christine used her spotlight to advocate for other transgender people, transforming from a tabloid oddity into a folk heroine. She faced intrusive questions and ridicule with extraordinary grace, insisting she was simply happy to be herself at last. Her autobiography and lecture tours kept her in the public eye for decades. But her very existence ignited a wildfire of whispered speculation. If a shy ex-soldier could become a poised starlet, what other transformations lurked beneath Hollywood's glittering surface? Rumors began to swirl that studios were quietly reviewing their rosters, searching for hidden pasts. Christine Jorgensen had opened a door, and through it, the public would soon glimpse an even more scandalous story, one that didn't just shock America, but tore apart the British aristocracy itself. If Christine Jorgensen was America's first transatlantic shockwave, April Ashley was Britain's elegant earthquake. Tall, raven-haired, with the cheekbones of a Grecian statue, April dazzled 1960s high society as a top fashion model. She posed for David Bailey and Terence Donovan, graced the pages of Vogue, and even landed a small role alongside Bing Crosby and Bob Hope in The Road to Hong Kong. But the life she had so meticulously built rested on a knife's edge, and the person holding the blade was someone she once called a friend. Born George Jameson in working-class Liverpool, April's early years were a nightmare of misalignment. She served in the Merchant Navy, then endured brutal electroshock therapy in a desperate attempt to feel normal. Nothing worked. So in 1960, at 25, she traveled to Casablanca for sex reassignment surgery, becoming one of the first Britons to do so. "Finally, I was going to be a real woman inside and out," she later said. Emerging from the procedure, April reinvented herself with transatlantic poise, a model's stride, and a secret buried deep beneath haute couture gowns. Her fairy tale reached its peak when she married the Honorable Arthur Corbett, a baron's son, gliding into a world of titled privilege. But in 1961, the fantasy imploded. A jealous acquaintance sold April's story to the press for a pitiful £5. Tabloids erupted with headlines bellowing that the glamorous socialite had been born a man. The fallout was swift and merciless. Her film credit was yanked to avoid scandal, modeling contracts evaporated overnight, and high society friends suddenly forgot her phone number. Worst of all, her husband sought to annul their marriage, leading to a landmark 1970 court case that cruelly invalidated her as a woman in the eyes of English law. Through the wreckage, April Ashley held her head high. "I risked my life to become my true self," she said simply, and never regretted it. Her staggering dignity in the face of public betrayal turned her into a reluctant pioneer. Decades later, attitudes would soften, and she would be hailed as a transgender icon, but in the moment, her story was a live grenade. It whispered an incendiary question through every drawing room and film set. If a baron's wife could have such a past, who else among the polished debutantes and screen goddesses might be carrying the same secret? The answer, it turned out, was already dancing under the cabaret lights of Paris. While Britain reeled from April Ashley's scandal, Paris was busy worshipping its own transgender sensation, and this one wore feathers, sequins, and an unapologetic smile. Her stage name was Coccinelle, the French word for ladybug, and by the late 1950s, she was the undisputed star of Le Carrousel de Paris, a nightclub famed for its dazzling troupe of transgender showgirls. Born Jacques de Fresnoy in 1931, Coccinelle knew her truth alarmingly early. "As a boy of 4, I knew I was a girl really," she confessed, but nobody could see it. In the smoky cabarets of the City of Lights, Jacques blossomed into Jacqueline, adopting the name Coccinelle after wearing a red and black polka dot dress to a party. Audiences were mesmerized by her beauty and voice, many unaware, or thrillingly aware, that she had been assigned male at birth. In 1958, Coccinelle traveled to Casablanca, the same city that had transformed April Ashley, for her own sex reassignment surgery. She became the first French person known to undergo the procedure, and she returned not in shame, but in triumph. "Dr. Bureau had rectified nature's mistake," she said joyfully. With platinum blonde hair and an irresistibly feminine image, she stepped back onto the stage, and her career skyrocketed. Coccinelle wasn't just a cabaret act. She appeared in films like Europa di Notte, built an international following, and in 1960 did something so audacious it made global headlines. She married a French journalist in a church wedding, reportedly the first trans woman in Europe to have a religious marriage. The image of the former Jacques as a blushing bride in white electrified the public. Some marveled at her bravery, others gawked with prurient curiosity. Through it all, Coccinelle wielded her platform with grace, later founding an association to support others seeking gender alignment. She proved that transformation could be a career asset, not a ruinous secret. Yet her very visibility invited a dangerous new question across the Atlantic. If Paris could embrace such metamorphosis, could Tinseltown's own silver screen goddesses be hiding something similar? The next name on our list didn't hide a surgical past, but she lived with one foot in a masculine persona so deeply that Hollywood could never stop talking. Far from the cabarets of Paris, a different kind of stardom flickered in the grainy light of New York's underground cinemas. Candy Darling was a tall, ethereal blonde who exuded the lost glamour of Jean Harlow and Kim Novak, but she was no studio creation. She was a self-made woman, born James Slattery in 1944 on Long Island, who spent her youth mesmerized by classic films and dreaming of escape. Candy transitioned in her late teens, crafting a persona of platinum hair, breathy voice, and a name as sweet as the roles she coveted. She became a fixture in Andy Warhol's inner circle, a superstar of avant-garde films like Flesh and Women in Revolt. There, she played the vamp, the society woman, the femme fatale, all with a knowing wink that left art house audiences entranced and confused. Lou Reed immortalized her in the hit Walk on the Wild Side, singing with matter-of-fact tenderness about the boy who shaved her legs, and then he was a she. Mainstream Hollywood slammed its doors on someone like Candy, but she carved a space in the counterculture, hosting cabaret nights and mingling with artists and musicians who accepted her completely. She wrapped her mystery in wit, teasing interviewers. "I am a mystery wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in a pink chiffon gown." For a brief, blazing moment, she was a cult figure, a downtown legend with genuine fan adoration. Then, tragically, the spotlight dimmed. Candy died of lymphoma in 1974 at just 29. On her deathbed, she scrawled a note as dramatic as any script. "I am just so bored by everything." You might say bored to death. Even her funeral felt like a scene from a movie. The great silent film star Gloria Swanson attended and saluted Candy's coffin, as though passing a torch from one era of glamour to a hidden, newer one. Candy's life proved that a gender transformation could be the making of a star, but her tragic brevity underscored how much the world was willing to worship mystery without offering safety. Her legacy posed a ghostly question that clung to the very rooftops of Hollywood. How many screen goddesses, past and present, had stories as wild as hers? The answer required no surgery, only a pair of trousers and an iron will, as our next legend was about to prove. When Marlene Dietrich strode on stage in a white tuxedo and top hat, then kissed a woman full on the lips in 1930 film Morocco, she didn't just cause a stir, she detonated every rule Hollywood had about femininity. Audiences gasped, censors scrambled, and an icon of androgyny was born. Dietrich would spend the rest of her career winking at the line between male and female, draping herself in ambiguity like the finest silk. "I am at heart a gentleman," she famously quipped, and she meant it. Off-screen, Dietrich wore custom-fitted men's suits, slacks, and military jackets, her hair slicked back with a confidence that made male co-stars nervous. The city of Paris actually threatened to arrest her in 1933 for wearing trousers in public, an old bylaw still technically on the books. Marlene's response? She strode through the capital in a tailored pantsuit, photographs blazing across newspapers worldwide, daring anyone to stop her. It was probably a publicity stunt, but it cemented her reputation as a gender outlaw. Her playful ambiguity was a weapon. She'd tell journalists contradictory tales, one day a devoted domestic, the next a scandalous affair with a famous woman, leaving everyone guessing. In reality, Dietrich was openly bisexual in her private circles, having passionate relationships with both men and women, while the Hollywood machinery frantically covered her tracks. She understood instinctively that gender was a performance, and she executed it with surgical precision. Sometimes she'd wow Allied troops during World War II by showing a lot of leg. Other nights, she'd wear a soldier's uniform, claiming she'd wished as a child that she'd been a boy. All this theatrical gender-bending inevitably bred whispers. If any Golden Age star could have conceivably been born male, conspiracy theorists pointed straight at Dietrich. Her bold male attire, they murmured, was practically a confession. She never confirmed or denied such talk. She simply continued dressing for the image, not for anyone else. Marlene's refusal to be boxed and helped make films like Blonde Venus and Shanghai Express into hits, proving that blurring gender could be a career superpower. As audiences thrilled to her masculine-feminine duality, they couldn't help but wonder, if Dietrich could play so effortlessly with identity, what about that other famously trouser-clad, fiercely private star with the patrician cheekbones? Her name was Katharine Hepburn, and her own secret life was even more layered. If Marlene Dietrich weaponized androgyny as style, Katharine Hepburn lived it as instinct. With razor-sharp cheekbones, an athletic stride, and a defiant preference for slacks in an era of frilly dresses, Hepburn was the walking antithesis of a typical 1930s starlet. She didn't just break conventions, she seemed to forget they existed. And Hollywood noticed. Hepburn's most intriguing secret wasn't a surgery or a hidden document, but a lifelong psychological companion she called Jimmy. From her teenage years, she nicknamed herself Jimmy and often referred to herself with male pronouns in private. Friends recalled that while other tomboys eventually outgrew the phase, Kate never did. "I'm the man of the house," she'd declare, or "I'm the best guy for the job." Biographer William Mann noted she really felt more comfortable living as a boy and often thought of herself as a man. This wasn't a clinical transition, but a deeply internalized masculine identity that spilled into every aspect of her public life. Studio bosses were baffled and furious. Hepburn wore trousers on the lot when every other actress was in chiffon, MGM's Louis B. Mayer once had her pants confiscated, only for Hepburn to stroll around in her underwear until they were returned. Gossip columns hummed with coded language, branding her unnatural, a catch-all slur for queer or gender nonconforming. Her long-term romantic companionship with women was an open secret, and her famous love affair with Spencer Tracy was widely suspected of being a strategic cover. None of this stopped her from winning 4 Oscars. Hepburn's masculine energy was her charisma. She could hold her own against any man on screen, and audiences adored her for it. Yet the mystery clung. One 1940s fan magazine teased, "There's something different about Kate, something she's not telling us." Decades later, when asked about the rumors, she replied with characteristic aplomb, "I've worn trousers so long I've forgotten how to wear skirts. If that makes me a mythical man, so be it." The public never learned the full truth of Hepburn's inner Jimmy, but the speculation itself became part of her legend. It also set the stage for another figure who made ambiguity an art form, a reclusive Swedish sphinx who would only whisper, "I want to be alone. I want to be alone." That famous line, purred in Greta Garbo's deep, husky voice, became the mantra of the most enigmatic star Hollywood has ever known. The Swedish-born goddess was tall with a strong jaw and an almost otherworldly androgyny that fascinated and unsettled audiences in equal measure. On screen, she could radiate intense femininity. Off-screen, her closets brimmed with mannish suits, button-down shirts, and loafers. She signed letters as Harry Boy and called herself a fellow among close friends. Garbo's reclusiveness was legendary. She never married, never had children, and fiercely guarded her private life, though it later emerged she had passionate, long-term affairs with women. In her films, she occasionally blurred gender, most famously as Queen Christina, where she cross-dressed and carried a distinctly gender-bending aura. The effect was hypnotic. Audiences projected every fantasy onto her, and the studio happily fed the mystique, branding her the Swedish Sphinx. The speculation about Garbo's sex went further than with most stars. Some whispered outright that she might have been born male. Conspiracy theorists pointed to her height, her broad shoulders, her confident, almost regal stride. Photographs of her in a trench coat and trousers, collar turned up, could easily be mistaken for a handsome, young man. The Paris chief of police even warned that if she wore trousers in public there, she risked arrest under an old cross-dressing law. So sensational were her simple fashion choices. Garbo's early retirement at 36 poured fuel on the fire. Why would the world's most luminous star vanish just as her career seemed eternal? Gossip mongers whispered it was before a masculine truth became too evident with age. In reality, Garbo likely battled severe social anxiety and simply craved privacy, but the legend was too delicious to abandon. Biographer Lois Banner observed that Garbo let her boy out of the box in private and in certain roles, and her embrace of both masculine and feminine energies made her an unwitting queer icon. Columnist Hedda Hopper wrote, "Garbo gives you the impression she knows a secret the rest of us can't fathom." That secret, whether it was a hidden self or merely the ultimate act of performance, kept the world guessing, and it primed the rumor mill for yet another powerhouse whose very name became synonymous with control and concealment: Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford's face was an empire of willpower, those enormous eyes, the sculpted cheekbones, the mouth that never trembled. She rose from a rough Texas childhood as Lucille Lesueur to become one of Hollywood's most commanding stars. But her powerful presence, athletic build, strong jawline, and an intensity that could seem almost masculine, sparked some of the most salacious rumors in film history. Could the ultimate self-made woman have been born something other than a woman? The whispers never made the mainstream press, but they slithered through Hollywood's secret networks. Early in her career, as a chorus girl, Crawford sometimes performed in male drag, a fact the studio buried as they reshaped her into a glamorous ingenue. Later, her distinctive broad shoulders were softened by signature padded dresses, a stylistic choice that conspiracy theorists later claimed was meant to disguise masculine proportions. Joan adopted 4 children but never bore any biologically, and in a pre-IVF world, some gossip mongers pointed to infertility as evidence of a deeper secret. Crawford's personal life offered more fuel. She was part of Hollywood's hidden sewing circle of bisexual and lesbian actresses, and persistent rumors linked her romantically to stars like Marilyn Monroe. The logic was twisted. Loving women did make someone male, but the salacious leap was easy for a town addicted to scandal. Through it all, Joan controlled her image like a general. "If you want to see the girl next door, go next door," she famously said. "I'm playing abroad." The idea that Crawford's relentless self-reinvention disguised a grand secret became the stuff of pulp novels. After her death, her adopted daughter's memoir Mommy Dearest painted her as a deranged, almost mannish tyrant shrieking about wire hangers, cementing a caricature of unnatural, domineering force. The rumors, however baseless, highlighted how profoundly Crawford defied the soft, submissive femininity expected of actresses. Her intense persona left audiences both awed and suspicious. As one era of tough, no-nonsense women gave way to another, a scrappy Brooklyn orphan named Barbara Stanwyck was already striding onto sound stages in tailored suits, armed with a similar don't-mess-with-me aura, and an equally guarded private life that would only deepen the mystery. Joan Crawford's face was an empire of willpower, those enormous eyes, the sculpted cheekbones, the mouth that never trembled. She rose from a rough Texas childhood as Lucille Lesueur to become one of Hollywood's most commanding stars. But her powerful presence, athletic build, strong jawline, and an intensity that could seem almost masculine, sparked some of the most salacious rumors in film history. Could the ultimate self-made woman have been born something other than a woman? The whispers never made the mainstream press, but they slithered through Hollywood's secret networks. Early in her career as a chorus girl, Crawford sometimes performed in male drag, a fact the studio buried as they reshaped her into a glamorous ingenue. Later, her distinctive broad shoulders were softened by signature padded dresses, a stylistic choice that conspiracy theorists later claimed was meant to disguise masculine proportions. Joan adopted 4 children but never bore any biologically, and in a pre-IVF world, some gossipmongers pointed to infertility as evidence of a deeper secret. Crawford's personal life offered more fuel. She was part of Hollywood's hidden sewing circle of bisexual and lesbian actresses, and persistent rumors linked her romantically to stars like Marilyn Monroe. The logic was twisted. Loving women didn't make someone male, but the salacious leap was easy for a town addicted to scandal. Through it all, Joan controlled her image like a general. "If you want to see the girl next door, go next door," she famously said. "I'm playing abroad." The idea that Crawford's relentless self-reinvention disguised a grand secret became the stuff of pulp novels. After her death, her adopted daughter's memoir Mommy Dearest painted her as a deranged, almost mannish tyrant shrieking about wire hangers, cementing a caricature of unnatural, domineering force. The rumors, however baseless, highlighted how profoundly Crawford defied the soft, submissive femininity expected of actresses. Her intense persona left audiences both awed and suspicious. As one era of tough, no-nonsense women gave way to another, a scrappy Brooklyn orphan named Barbara Stanwyck was already striding onto sound stages in tailored suits, armed with a similar "don't mess with me" aura, and an equally guarded private life that would only deepen the mystery. Nobody told Barbara Stanwyck what to do. On screen, she could switch from sultry femme fatale to rugged ranch owner without missing a beat. Off-screen, her straight-talking, no-frills persona earned her the nickname Missy, an honorific that carried a whiff of the tomboy she'd always been. In a Hollywood drowning in ruffles, Stanwyck preferred tailored suits, did her own dangerous stunts, and spoke in a husky, authoritative voice that commanded instant respect. Naturally, the rumor mill wondered, could this tough self-made woman have started life as a boy? Born Ruby Stevens in Brooklyn, orphaned young, and raised in foster homes, she was scrappy and independent from the start. As a teenage chorus dancer, she reportedly dressed as a boy to sneak into speakeasies without being hassled, a survival trick that later fed conspiratorial imaginations. When the studio recast her as Barbara Stanwyck, they couldn't sand off her rough edges. She played ambitious, sexually assertive women with a conviction that felt real, because in many ways it was. Stanwyck divorced twice, and insiders murmured the marriages failed because they couldn't conceal her real interests. She was part of Hollywood's Lavender Network, deeply embedded in circles with known lesbians, and whispered to have had intimate relationships with women, including a long, close friendship with actress Barbara Pepper. To the scandal-minded, a woman who loved women and spurned domestic norms was already half a man. Outlandish theories emerged that her deep secret was a male anatomy, pointing to her athletic, muscular legs and her preference for being addressed simply as Stanwyck. She never dignified the gossip with a direct response, maintaining a curt, guarded public persona that only intensified the mystique. Even the notorious scandal rag Confidential tread lightly, once hinting at a gay embrace at a party, but stopping short of naming her. Stanwyck's androgynous toughness never hurt her career. She had one of the longest, most versatile runs in the business, from pre-code vamp to beloved TV matriarch. In one of her final interviews, she tackled the whispers head-on. "I've been told I'm a very masculine woman. Well, if that means I know what I want and go after it, I'll take it." It was a declaration that could have come from any gender trailblazer. With that kind of unapologetic fire, only one figure could close our story. A woman so outrageous, so openly ambisextrous, that speculation about her birth gender seemed almost beside the point. Tallulah Bankhead. If all of old Hollywood was a masquerade, Tallulah Bankhead ripped off the mask and laughed at whoever was underneath. The Alabama-born actress crashed through the 1930s and 40s with a whiskey-soaked voice, a penchant for cigars, and a libido that refused to be categorized. She called herself ambisextrous and meant it, brazenly seducing both men and women with the same throaty chuckle. When the other stars of our story tiptoed around gender lines, Tallulah tap-danced right over them. Bankhead's deep, raspy voice led one critic to joke she sounded like a man impersonating a woman. She took it as a compliment. On stage in London in the 1920s, she happily donned male drag for nightclub skits. At home, she hosted scandalous parties where every guest had to cross-dress. She'd appear at formal events in a tailored suit one night and a backless satin gown the next, famously refusing to wear underwear. The rules simply didn't apply. Such unapologetic flamboyance naturally bred wild theories. Some whispered that her notorious inability to have children was because she had been born male and something had gone wrong. It was baseless slander, but Tallulah would have adored it. She thrived on any reputation that kept her talk about. Playwright Tennessee Williams, her close friend, called her an anatomical epicene, meaning she embodied both male and female principles. She flaunted her queerness at a time when a Hays Code was smothering all such content, openly flirting with Marlene Dietrich at parties, and playing queer-coded characters with a wink. Her catchphrase could have been the motto for every legend in this tale: "I'm as pure as the driven slush." She didn't just survive the whispers, she weaponized them, using outrage as fuel for a career that spanned stage, screen, and radio. When the curtain finally fell, Tallulah Bankhead had proven that the most dangerous, electrifying thing a woman could do in Hollywood's golden age was refuse to explain herself. From the surgical pioneers who risked their lives to the icons who simply lived their truth in plain sight, all 10 of these women forced a rigid world to question what it really meant to be a star, and what secrets might still be hiding in the silver nitrate shadows.